Hey everybody, welcome back. Yes, I am still on trail. I'm in Virginia. I realize that it's been a ridiculous amount of time since I got my last video up. I actually want to change that a little bit. I want to get them up more frequently. So I'm actually going to change the format of these videos a little bit in order to make that happen. And not only for that reason, but I feel like if I do a little bit more walking and talking as I'm on the trail, I'll be able to give you a lot more information about the trail while I have the presence of mind to do it. So moving forward, I am going to try to be a lot more informative in these videos. This particular video, I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, it's not extremely informative about the trail, but I did want to get it up so that you could kind of see the sights and everything that I was able to see on this section of trail. And it is a large section of trail. It goes from Standing Bear Hostel, which is just north of the Smoky Mountains, all the way to Damascus, Virginia. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. So once I left Standing Bear, I bet I didn't get any more than about a half mile up the trail before it started to rain on me. And that of course was a bummer, because anytime you're leaving town or a hostel or anything and you've got clean dry laundry on, last thing you want is rain. But luckily it only lasted a few minutes, didn't get us too wet, and you know, it stopped. We only went a couple of miles that day, so we got into camp pretty early. And when we got there, we got lucky enough to find some morel mushrooms, which are delicious, and we were able to cook them over the campfire. The following day, as we were hiking, we were able to see kind of a clearing up at the top of a mountain. I didn't realize we were coming up on a bald, and when we got up there I realized that it was the FAA tower that's up there. I've seen in other people's pictures and videos. It's kind of out of place up there, but there's a beautiful view around it. I wasn't able to stay for long, but that's because you can see here that the weather, it was a little bit ominous in the distance, and we needed to get off that bald and back into the woods. Alright, so Max Patch, I'm pretty bummed out about this. Supposedly there's some beautiful views up at the top of Max Patch, but as you can see, the day that I got up there, it was just no visibility whatsoever. It was extremely windy. I could only imagine there's beautiful views. Of course, I've seen pictures and things like that of it, but there is a road that comes up really close to the top of it, and it's an easy hike up to the top of Max Patch. So this is definitely a place that I feel like I need to come back to at some point to look at the views. A lot of people said it's some of the best views in the southern part of the Appalachian Trail, so I'll most likely be coming back to check it out. But somebody was gracious enough to leave some trail magic up at the top of Max Patch. There were some bananas and some sodas and things like that. So that, of course, was very well appreciated. The next town that I stopped in for a resupply as well as a little rest and relaxation was Hot Springs, North Carolina. It was actually a really pretty hike into Hot Springs, North Carolina. I remember that day it was very perfect temperature. I think it was like the mid-60s. There was very low humidity. There were a lot of pretty views along the way. Hot Springs, North Carolina is a really cool little town that you walk right through. The Appalachian Trail actually walks directly through the town on the sidewalk. We ended up staying at a place called the Alpine Court Motel, which was actually, you know, it was perfect for hikers. It was very appropriately priced. It was a nice stay. I do have to recommend that you stop into the Smoky Mountain Diner. They had excellent breakfast, and they also had amazing burgers. I really didn't want to have to leave Hot Springs, but of course, you know, I had to. I needed to head north. And the climb out of Hot Springs was pretty steep, but it wasn't very long. And there were several places along the climb that you got to look back onto Hot Springs. It was really pretty. Something that I wanted to make sure to mention is that at a road crossing called Allen Gap on the AT, there's a little store called Mom's Store. It's just to the right of the AT if you're heading northbound. And I had heard about this store before I even came out on the trail. I didn't know exactly where it was, but that morning Stuck Norris and I had stopped for water at a shelter, and another through hiker had told us that we were coming up on this store. So we were very excited about it all morning. You know, we wanted to stop in, get a cold drink, a snack, you know, sit down and hang out for a few minutes. You know, it's just a good morale boost. You know, when you're in the woods for days on end, it's always nice to come across something like that. Unfortunately though, right before we got to Allen Gap, there's a little sign for Mom's Store. Unfortunately, on that sign, somebody had scratched into it, closed Sundays. Naturally, I looked down at my watch and I realized that it's Sunday that we're passing through there. So we're a little bit defeated, really looking forward to getting some refreshments. But the redeeming quality to this was a fellow through hiker named Disciple. He's got a YouTube page as well. It's called Not By Sight. I'll put a link to that in the description. His wife and family had come to surprise him at Hot Springs, North Carolina. And they decided while they were in town that they would do some trail magic, which was awesome. It could not have been at any better place at any better time for us, because it was no more than probably 100 yards north on the trail that we run into his family. They were wrapping things up, but they made sure that, you know, we had cold Gatorade, you know, they had cookies. They were super friendly. His family was extremely nice. His wife actually recognized me from this YouTube channel, and it was kind of cool to run into somebody in the middle of nowhere that actually knows my real name. So that was very cool. Thank you very much for doing that. That was the best time trail magic I've had so far. So some of my friends and family and other people that may have happened upon this YouTube channel that don't know a whole lot about the AT are probably wondering what I mean by people not really knowing my real name out here. And on the AT, it's a tradition that everybody goes by a trail name, and it could be anything. Generally, it's something you know, stupid or silly or ridiculous that's happened to you or that you've done or anything like that. I go by Vitamin D. That happens to be my trail name. I can't really give you the whole story to that here on the YouTube channel. I'm trying to keep things kind of PG for everybody, but you could use your imagination. We'll say that it's because I'm from Florida, the Sunshine State, which is that actually is part of the story. But yeah, Vitamin D is my trail name. So on a cloudy and rainy day, I happened upon a section of trail known as the Jerry Miller Trail, which actually has a bad weather bypass to it, and that's not a very common thing on the AT. But even with it being bad weather, there wasn't really any lightning, but it was raining pretty hard, and it was extremely cloudy. There was no visibility. I decided to take, you know, the traditional route on the AT, and that's what I do. I hike, you know, every step of the AT. So I went up onto the Jerry Miller Trail rather than the bad weather bypass trail. What I didn't realize is this trail it's a very difficult section of trail. It's pretty much bouldering. There's sections in this, you know, on this trail to where you literally have to sit down on one rock and pretty much drop down onto another, and it gets really tricky. But anyways, it was raining really hard while I was up there, and I got to the very top of it, and I had slipped on a rock. When I landed on my left knee, and I hit pretty hard. I mean, it hit so hard that, you know, I immediately felt like I needed to throw up. It was pretty painful, the impact was. You know, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if this hike was over, if I had really torn up my knee or what. Luckily, it turned out to be a pretty superficial thing. You know, it bruised pretty bad, but it didn't really hinder my walking or anything. Within a few days, I didn't feel it at all, with the exception of when I was crawling in and out of my tent, of course, with my body weight on my knee. You know, I was able to feel it for a few weeks that way, but I got very lucky. You know, it was pretty nerve-wracking though. I thought my hike might have been over just from one slip. As I was hiking along a really nice section of trail, I happened upon a little short spur trail that went up to a clearing. Decided to go up there and have lunch, and ended up at a pretty interesting spot. Ended up at what's known as the Shelton Graves. And the Shelton Graves are actually, there's grave markers there that are the spot where 2 Union soldiers were killed while visiting family in the Confederacy during the Civil War. So it's a very interesting place. While I might have missed all the views up on Mac's Patch, I did get some really cool sunset views up on Big Bald. I had to hike kind of late to do it, but it was totally worth it. So my next town stop was Erwin, Tennessee. And Erwin, Tennessee is a really cool little town in Tennessee. When I first got there, I stayed at the Super 8 motel, and I had planned to take a 0 day there because my dad was actually going to be coming through there. And he had brought me some supplies that I needed, and I was lucky enough to hang out with him for a day. So once I left the Super 8, I was actually planning on leaving Erwin, Tennessee, but Miss Janet, who you saw in my Smoky Mountains video, the Trail Angel, she had invited Stuck Norris and I to, to come over to her place, and she would slack pack us and things like that, and she had kind of a little pop-up hostel there for some hikers, and it was a really cool experience. We ended up being there for probably almost a week. Really enjoyed it though. Met a lot of really cool people there. Some of the hikers are still some of my best friends here on the trail that I met there. So again, she was amazing as always. Just opened her house. First thing she said was, go on in, make yourself at home. It was just a super relaxed experience, and we'll forever be indebted to her for that. When we finally made it out of Erwin, we actually ended up at a really cool campsite, and it was the site of an old apple orchard. The Rhone Highlands. This was an absolutely beautiful section of trail. It was just filled with balds that had amazing views. It just speaks for itself. One of the coolest shelters that I've come across on the AT so far has been Over Mountain Shelter. It's a little bit off trail, but it's an old barn that's got this gorgeous view of the valley. I didn't get to stay there, but I'm glad that I went down there and checked it out. There's a lot of room there, a lot of room for tenting. There's also tons of room in the shelter. You can get quite a few people in this thing. So my next stop on the trail was Mountain Harbor Hostel. This place was amazing. It's right when you cross Highway 19 East in North Carolina on the AT. If you're heading northbound, you take a left on the road. You just walk up like a few tenths of a mile, and you'll see it on the right. This was one of those hostels that they just seemed to have thought of everything. It was really nice, really clean. Everybody was friendly. They even had a food truck out front, which had amazing food, by the way, very reasonably priced. But the main thing you need to know about this hostel is you need to eat the breakfast. It is amazing. From Mountain Harbor Hostel, Miss Janet, she was actually kind enough to pick up Stuck Norris, myself, and some other hikers and drive us up to Trail Days. And Trail Days is an annual festival, hiking festival in Damascus, Virginia. It's really a good time. I think that all through hikers that are hiking the trail, if it's reasonable, you should try to go to this. And it's even a cool thing that people tend to go back to year after they've hiked the trail. But it's kind of a fun show to watch. Here you can see the parade that goes on every year with present and past through hikers. It's a really good time. The townspeople wet you. I guess the tradition was through hikers smelled so bad that during the parade the town people would start wetting them with water guns and water hoses and things like that, and the tradition stuck. But it really wasn't necessary for them to wet us down, because as you can see, it actually started storming on us, and we got quite a bit of rain that day. After Trail Days, we returned back to Mountain Harbor Hostel where we had left off the trail. A buddy of Stuck Norris and mine, Soko, him and his girlfriend were kind enough to give us a ride back to Mountain Harbor Hostel, which was awesome of them. And we were happy to get back there. It was great to stay there again. As you can tell, I really enjoyed the place, and we were able to take advantage of that amazing breakfast again. The hike out of Mountain Harbor was actually really nice, with the exception of the fact that, just like Standing Bear, we didn't get very far before we got rained on again. But there were some really cool waterfalls along the way. It's a really cool section of trail to check out. We didn't really plan on it, but we ended up staying at a place called Black Bear Resort, which you were able to walk to from the trail. And we were both pretty low on food, Stuck Norris and myself, that is. So we stopped there. We were able to get some more food, and we stayed in a cabin. The place was really neat. It was actually very clean, very well run. They had a good, reasonable resupply in there, and we really enjoyed ourselves there. Not far at all after you leave Black Bear Resort, you come across Laurel Falls. This was an absolutely beautiful waterfall, and you actually have a pretty nice walk right by the creek for a little ways right after the waterfall. So Stuck Norris and I decided to take advantage of the fact that there were some really prime camping spots right along the river, and we just set up camp a little early and enjoyed the afternoon right there across from the river. The next sign of civilization that we came across was the Shook Branch Recreation Area, and that sits right on the Watauga Lake. That was a really cool area because they had real bathrooms that we can use, and as I've mentioned before, having true bathrooms is kind of a it's definitely a privilege on the trail to us through hikers. And they also had clean water we were able to refill our water bottles with, and nice picnic tables and things with a beautiful view of the lake that we were able to sit down and enjoy breakfast at. So one morning, Stuck Norris and I had stopped to get some water. It was just going to be a normal day on trail. We had something like 16 or 17 miles planned for the day, and it was supposed to be some pretty good hiking. But at this very first water source, it was maybe 2 miles into the day, a fellow thru-hiker had let us know that at the road gap ahead of us, I think it was 7 miles ahead of us at the time, he let us know that there's a delivery service that delivers food from a bunch of area restaurants to that trailhead, you know, just for a small delivery fee. So, of course, that pretty much stifled our plans for the day. Once we caught wind of this, we had really good phone service. We were able to look them up. It was true. It's called Mountain City Delivery. And they basically deliver food from any restaurant in Mountain City, Tennessee that you would like up to the trailhead where the AT crosses Highway 91. So Stuck Norris and I opted to order some Chinese food, and we ordered quite a bit of Chinese food. It was enough to eat an awful lot right there at the road crossing, as well as to pack out a very large dinner for that night. And yeah, it definitely ruined our mileage, but it was totally worth it. But the beauty of this is about the next half of a mile after we stuffed ourselves on Chinese food at this road crossing, the AT is actually handicap accessible. So you've got a half mile of really nice flat walking. It just worked out perfectly. It was a very worthwhile thing. So our first stop in Virginia was in Damascus. That's the first city that you come to in Virginia, and Stuck Norris and I had opted to stay at the Hiker's Inn. This place I've got to highly recommend. It was just a very nice, relaxed place. The first night that we were there, we stayed in their Airstream trailer that they have on the property, which was really cool. They had everything that you need in there. It was really comfortable beds. There was 2 twin beds in there. You know, there was a microwave, a refrigerator, coffee maker. There was tea in there if you wanted to make hot tea. Just a super nice place. Unfortunately, the second night that we stayed at the Hiker's Inn, the Airstream was rented, so we ended up staying in the house, but it didn't end up being a bad thing at all because the house is just beautiful. It's an immaculate old house right on the main street that goes through Damascus, and the beds were extremely comfortable. Everybody that was there was super nice. The place is owned and operated by a former thru-hiker. That was just extremely nice. It made for a very pleasant experience, and again, it's a place that I have to highly recommend to everybody coming through Damascus. To be completely honest with you, Stuck Norris and I weren't even planning on spending 2 nights in Damascus, but we were actually just going to come in for 1 night, get a resupply, and get out of town the following day. But when I got in there, I found out that the brewery, the Damascus Brewery, they're only open on the weekends. I want to say it's Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights, and we got in on a Wednesday. So I talked Stuck Norris into staying, and you know, because I wasn't going to pass up a local brewery, and it was worth it. They had a lot of really good beers, and it was a great time. Thanks everybody for watching. Again, I apologize that this wasn't the most informative video. However, that will change here in the future. If you have any questions or comments for me, be sure to leave them and I'll get back to you as soon as I can, and I will talk to you soon.